Hello, friends, and Happy New Year. I don't know about you, but I often stop by 7-Eleven around lunchtime to grab some cigarettes and a sandwich. After the stories you're about to hear, though, I'll probably be going there a lot less often. Enjoy listening.
My name's Greg. I used to drive a delivery route for a bread company in eastern Ohio. This meant I started my days around 3 a.m. The only place open was this one 7-Eleven on the edge of town, right where the streetlights ended and the cornfields began. It was my regular stop for coffee and a bad breakfast sandwich. I got to know the night clerk, an older guy named Frank. Quiet, kept to himself. We'd just nod at each other. I'd get my stuff, he'd ring me up. That was it. This one Tuesday, I pulled in like always. Something felt off immediately. The parking lot was empty, which was normal, but the big front window was just dark. Not like the lights were off inside, but like something was pressed against the glass from the inside. I almost drove off, but I needed the coffee. I told myself a bulb had blown. I walked in. The lights were actually on, but dim, and Frank wasn't at the register. The place was silent, except for the hum of the coolers. I called out, "Frank?" No answer. I figured he was in the back stockroom. I went to get my coffee. That's when I saw the floor behind the counter. There was a mop bucket, and the water in it was pink. Not red, but a light diluted pink, like someone had tried to clean something up. My heart started going. I set the coffee down. "Frank, you okay?" Then I heard a sound from the back hallway that leads to the storage in the employee bathroom. A slow, wet dragging sound, like someone pulling a heavy, damp bag across linoleum. I didn't move. I just stared down that dark hallway. The dragon stopped. Then I saw a hand appear around the corner at floor level. It slapped down on the hallway floor. Then another hand. Frank was crawling out of the hallway. His face was white. He was dragging his legs behind him. He looked right at me. He didn't scream, he just whispered, "He's still in the bathroom." I froze. My brain just locked up. Frank collapsed, his head on the floor. Then the bathroom door at the end of the hall creaked open. I didn't see anyone, just the door opening wider. That's when I ran. I didn't call out, I didn't try to help Frank. I just turned and ran out to my truck, my keys already in my hand. I peeled out of that lot and drove 5 miles before I pulled over and fumbled for my phone to call 911. I told the operator everything. They asked for the location. I gave it. They asked if I could describe the suspect. I said I never saw anyone, just the door opening. They sent cars. I was too scared to go back. I drove to the next town and waited in a diner parking lot until the sun came up. Around 7 a.m., my boss called. He said my 7-Eleven was closed off with police tape. He asked if I'd heard what happened. I said no. He said the word on the scanner was that the night clerk, Frank, was in the hospital. He'd been stabbed, but he was alive. I felt a flood of relief. Frank was alive. Then my boss said, "The weird thing is, they didn't take anything. The register was full. They just attacked him and then hid in the store. Cops said it looks like the guy was waiting for someone else." I didn't say anything. I just thanked him and hung up.
The police contacted me later that day. I gave my statement. They asked why I was there so early. I explained my job. They nodded, wrote it down. They said Frank was stable. He described his attacker as a man in dark clothes, but he didn't get a good look.
The guy had just been lurking in the store and jumped him when he went to check the back. The detective said, "You're lucky. If you'd gone back there to check on the noise instead of just calling out, well, you wouldn't be talking to me right now." He said it like he was giving me a compliment on my caution. I tried to go back to my routine, but I changed my stop to a gas station 10 miles out of my way. About a week later, I was at a hardware store in the afternoon. I was loading bags of mulch into my truck. I turned around and I saw a man standing by the store entrance, just watching the parking lot. He was wearing a dark jacket. He wasn't looking at me, he was just scanning. And I recognized him. Not his face, I'd never seen his face. I recognized his posture, the way he stood. He was the same build as the shadow I'd imagined in that dark hallway. It was just a feeling, a cold jolt in my stomach. He turned and went inside the hardware store. I finished loading my truck as fast as I could, my neck prickling the whole time. As I got in my cab, I looked back at the store entrance. He was back, standing just outside the doors, and this time he was looking directly at my truck, not in a casual way. He was staring. He took a step forward. I started the engine and left. I watched him in my rear view until I turned a corner. I told myself it was nothing, just my nerves, a guy standing outside a store, but I couldn't shake the timing. The 7-Eleven was on the outskirts of town. The hardware store was on the complete opposite side. There was no reason for the same guy to be in both places, unless he lived here, or unless he was following a routine. My routine. I haven't seen him again. It's been 3 months. Frank recovered and moved to another state. That 7-Eleven reopened with a new manager. But now, every time I pull into any gas station, any convenience store in that quiet, dark hour before dawn, I don't just look for people inside. I look in my rearview mirror first. I check the back seat before I get out, and I never, ever call out into a quiet room again. Because I keep thinking about what that detective said, that the guy in the bathroom wasn't there to rob the place. He was waiting, and I keep wondering who he was waiting for.
My name is David. Last year, I was a graduate student in Tucson, Arizona, living in a cheap apartment complex. There was a 7-Eleven about 2 blocks away. It was my lifeline for energy drinks, frozen burritos, and overpriced toilet paper. I started seeing the same woman there, always at night between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. She'd be in the parking lot, sitting on the low concrete wall by the dumpster enclosure. Late 20s maybe, plain clothes. She always had a large, faded green backpack next to her. She'd just sit there, staring at her phone. The first few times, I didn't think much of it. Tucson has a lot of people down on their luck. But after 2 weeks of seeing her almost every time I went, it got weird. She was always there, like a fixture. I never saw her go into the store. I never saw her buy anything. She just sat. One night, I was walking back from the store with my bag of stuff. She looked up from her phone as I passed. She had a tired, friendly face. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said back, picking up my pace a little. "You live around here?" she asked. I just nodded and kept walking. I heard her say, "Lucky," but quietly, like to herself. The next night, she was there again. This time, she spoke as I was going in. "Could you get me a water? A large one?" She held out a crumpled dollar bill and some change. I paused. It felt safe enough. It was a public parking lot. "Sure," I said. I took the money. When I came out with the water, she thanked me. She said her name was Chloe. She asked if I lived alone. That set off alarms. I just said, "Have a good night," and left. A week later, things got more direct. I was coming out and she was standing up, stretching. She walked towards me, not in a threatening way, but it made me stop. "Listen," she said, "I'm in a really bad spot. My boyfriend, he's not a good guy. I just need a place to crash for one night, just a couch. I'll be gone in the morning, I promise." I immediately said no. I told her I had roommates, which was a lie. I lived alone. She looked defeated but nodded. "I get it," she said. "Sorry to ask." I felt guilty, but also relieved. I told my friend Mark about it the next day. He said I did the right thing. He said it was a classic scam, maybe to rob me or case my apartment. I avoided the 7-Eleven for 3 nights. I drove to one further away. But on the 4th night, I was out of coffee and it was late. I walked over. The woman wasn't on the wall. I felt a wave of relief. Maybe she'd moved on. I got my coffee and went to the register. The clerk, a guy I'd seen before, rang me up. As I was paying, I nodded towards the parking lot. "The woman who's always out there, on the wall. Haven't seen her lately." The clerk's face went flat. He handed me my change. "You didn't hear?" "What?" He leaned forward slightly, keeping his voice low. "Cops found her 2 nights ago, in the wash behind the shopping center a mile from here." He paused. "She'd been there a while." I felt cold. What happened? They didn't say on the news, just an unattended death. But the guy who found her said it wasn't good. He looked at me. "She asked you for stuff, huh? A place to stay?" I just nodded, unable to speak. "She asked a lot of people," he said. "Last week she was telling one of the night stock guys that her boyfriend was going to kill her. Guess she wasn't lying."
I walked home in a daze. The guilt was crushing. I kept thinking I could have let her sleep on my couch, just one night. I didn't sleep. The next afternoon, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. A man in a clean, plain polo shirt stood there. He looked official. I opened the door a crack. "Yeah? David Miller?" he asked. "That's me." He held up a badge. "Detective. I'm following up on the death of Chloe Everett. We understand you had some contact with her at the 7-Eleven on Speedway." My heart hammered. "I talked to her a few times. She asked for water once, asked for a place to stay once. I said no." He nodded, writing in a notebook. "Did she ever mention anyone specific? A boyfriend? Anyone who was threatening her?" I repeated what I knew. He asked about her demeanor. Was she scared? I said she seemed tired, desperate. Then he asked, "And you never saw her with anyone? Never saw a man approaching her in the parking lot?" I said no. He closed his notebook. "Okay, thank you for your time. If you think of anything else, here's my card." He handed it to me. As he turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing, not letting her in. The guy we're looking for, he's someone she knew, someone she might have met at a place like that or let into her own space. Letting a stranger in is how this happens." He left. I closed the door and locked it. I looked at the detective's card. I should have felt absolved. He said I did the right thing. But all I could think about was the timeline. She asked me for a place to stay. I said no. A few days later, she was dead. And then I thought about the detective's last question. Never saw her with anyone? Never saw a man approaching her in the parking lot? He was trying to find the boyfriend, but the way he said it, it was like he was checking something else, like he was wondering if the man in the parking lot was me. I threw the card away. I moved out of that apartment at the end of the month. I still can't walk past that 7-Eleven. And when someone asks me for help now, even for something small, I don't just feel guilty, I feel afraid. Because you never know which choice is the one that saves your life, and which one is the one you'll have to live with forever. I'm Jake. This happened about 5 years ago when I worked the night shift at a packaging warehouse outside Indianapolis. My shift ended at 4 a.m. My ritual was to hit the same 24-hour 7-Eleven on my way home, get a giant soda, and just unwind in the quiet before going back to my empty apartment. This one guy was always there, same as me.
His name was Carl. He was a big, friendly trucker who drove a regional route. We'd end up at the counter at the same time, and we started talking. Just small talk about sports, bad coffee, the weirdness of being awake when the world is asleep. It became a thing. We'd meet there maybe 3 times a week, share a table for 15 minutes, then head our separate ways. He was a normal guy, talked about his wife, his 2 kids back in Ohio, showed me pictures. One Tuesday, Carl wasn't there. I didn't think much of it. Maybe his schedule changed. But he wasn't there the next time either, or the time after that. After 2 weeks, I figured he'd gotten a new route. Then, about a month later, he was back. I pulled into the lot and saw his rig with the same decal for a local hauling company. I felt a stupid little lift of my mood. I got my drink and saw him at our usual table. He looked tired, more than usual. "Hey, stranger," I said, sitting down. "Thought you quit on me." He gave me a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nah, just had some family stuff. Had to take some time off." We made small talk, but it was different. He was jumpy. He kept looking over my shoulder at the door. He'd stopped talking about his family completely. When I asked how the wife and kids were, he just said fine and changed the subject. Finally, I said, "Everything okay, man? You seem stressed." He stared into his coffee cup for a long time. The store was empty except for the clerk. The humming of the coolers was the only sound. "I did something," he said, his voice low. "On my last run, a month ago." I didn't say anything, I just waited. I was on I-70, past Columbus. It was pouring rain, real late, like 2 a.m. I was dead tired. He took a shaky breath. I felt this thump on the passenger side of the cab, like I'd clipped something big with my mirror. My stomach tightened. An animal? He looked at me, and his face was pale. It was a person. Jake. She was gone, right there in the ditch. His voice was a dry whisper. I panicked. I looked around. No other cars. No lights. Just me, the rain, and her. I thought about my kids, my license, my whole life. I got back in my truck, and I drove. A cold numbness spread through me. "You left the scene?" He nodded, just once. I drove for 2 hours in a blind panic. Then I called in sick, told my company I had a family emergency. I've been home for a month, losing my mind. "You have to report it," I said, my own voice sounding strange. "You have to call the police now. It was an accident. You said it was raining. You were tired." "They'll put me in jail," he said, his eyes desperate. "I left. That's a hit and run. That's prison. I lose everything." We sat in silence. I didn't know what to say. My friend, the normal guy, was confessing to a felony. A woman was dead. "Did anyone see you?" I finally asked. "I don't think so. No other cars. But that's not the worst part." He leaned forward. "Last week, I was at a rest stop near where it happened, just sitting in my cab, trying to get the nerve to drive that route again. A state trooper knocked on my window. Routine check, he said. He took my logbook, my license. He was friendly. But when he handed my license back, he looked at me and said, 'You drive this stretch often?' I said, 'Sometimes.' He just nodded and said, 'Be careful. We've had an incident, a fatality. Still looking for the vehicle.' Then he tapped the side of my rig, right where the mirror is. 'You should get that mirror looked at,' he said. 'The casing is cracked.' And he walked away. Carl's hands were trembling. He knew, Jake, or he suspected. He was letting me sweat, waiting for me to crack. I was in way over my head. I told him he needed a lawyer. He needed to turn himself in before they came for him. He just kept shaking his head. We left without saying much else. That was the last time I saw Carl at the 7-Eleven. I changed my routine, started going to a different store.
I watched the local news for weeks, but I never saw anything about an unidentified hit and run on I-70. I tried to put it out of my mind. Life went on. About 6 months later, I was in a different part of town, filling up at a gas station. I saw a big rig with that same hauling company decal pull in. It wasn't Carl's truck number, but I recognized the company. The driver got out, an older guy. I don't know what came over me. I walked over to him. "Excuse me," I said. "You know a driver named Carl? Big guy, used to run the night shift to Indy." The driver looked at me, his expression closing off. "Yeah, I know Carl." "Is he still with the company? I used to see him on my route." The man shook his head. He started fueling his truck, not looking at me. "No, he's gone. Had to let him go." "What happened?" I asked, a dread building in my chest.
The final man turned to me. His face was grim. Cops came for him 2 months ago. Turns out he was mixed up in something real bad. Not a traffic thing. They found evidence in his truck behind the sleeper berth. I must have looked confused because he lowered his voice. They found her purse, her wallet, everything. That woman who went missing near Columbus last year, the one they thought was a hitchhiker, they found her stuff in Carl's rig. They're charging him with murder. I felt the world tilt. Murder? But he said it was an accident, in the rain. The driver stared at me. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. I just stepped back. He finished pumping his gas. As he got back into his cab, he looked down at me. Carl told everyone it was an accident. That's what he said when they cuffed him, too. But the cops told our safety guy there was no rain the night that woman disappeared. It was clear. And she didn't get hit by a mirror. She was beaten. He slammed his door and drove off. I stood there at the pump, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. I thought about all those early morning talks, him showing me pictures of his kids, him talking about his wife. It was all just a cover, a performance for the one person who saw him regularly in the dead of night. He wasn't confessing to me out of guilt. He was testing his story, seeing if it would hold up with a normal person. He was using me to practice. The worst part? It worked. I believed him. I felt sorry for him. I sat there in that 7-Eleven and felt sympathy for a murderer. And the whole time, he was just watching my face, seeing if his lie was convincing enough to tell to the police. I never go to 7-Eleven at night anymore. And I think about that state trooper, the one who tapped the cracked mirror. He wasn't letting Carl sweat about a hit and run. He was letting a murderer know he was on his list. And I was sitting across from that murderer, drinking a soda, thinking he was my friend.
If you liked the story, subscribe and like it, and also write a comment about what topic you would like to hear about.